So, welcome to another episode of As Jazz Recommends. In this episode, we will talk about Werckmeister Harmonies. That is directed by Bellatar, so it's our first Bellatar film for the podcast. And as always, I will give a bit of context. So, it's an adaptation of a book. The book came out in 1989. It's called The Melancholy of Resistance by Laszlo Krasna Horgai. So, probably mispronounced that, even though Hungarian is actually kind of a sister language to Finnish. But if anybody actually knows the two languages, they are completely different, even though they are sister languages. Yeah, but I haven't read the book, but it's probably very interesting. But this is a very highly rated film. It has even been in the Sight and Sound poll quite high up there. And the title, Werckmeister Harmonies, actually refers to a 17th century Baroque musical theorist Andreas Werckmeister. So that's very interesting, and music plays a big role in this film. And to me, it's actually Bellatar's best film. It's definitely my personal favorite. I think most people would put Satan Tango as the number one and then Werckmeister Harmonies as the number two. But to me, this is just thematically more interesting, even though I love Satan Tango a lot as well. And this was my third time watching it. My first watch was something where I didn't love it quite as much as on my second and third watches, but now I consider this to be like an utter masterpiece, and I'll make this huge claim that it might actually be the greatest film made in the 21st century. So far, it's hard to find a film that's more thematically dense or more visually striking than Werckmeister Harmonies. This is what cinema as a medium was made for. But I'll give a quick plot synopsis, even though this film is more about the theme and the aesthetic, and our discussion will probably be in a very abstract thematical level as it was in the Tarkovsky discussions and in the Yoshida discussion. But this is situated in this small Hungarian village. It's very bleak village. There's this very cold atmosphere. But then suddenly in the main town square, there's this circus tent, and inside the circus tent, there is a whale. And then people gather around that whale, and we will analyze what that whale means and stuff. Again, there are kind of religious, political undertones here a lot, and it's a very nihilistic movie. But then after that whale comes and we follow that thing for a while, there is this kind of political unrest and kind of societal collapse, you could say, in this film. And when it kind of that thing starts and it kind of continues, then the film kind of becomes very emotional, I would say, in the last 30 or so minutes. Like the music fits the images so well and the story. Yeah. But that's basically Werckmeister Harmonies, and our brains will be destroyed when we try to analyze this and try to talk about these very high concept ideas. But it's definitely a type of film that is made for a film podcast, as you could interpret this film in so many different ways and through so many different lenses, whether it's the political or religious or philosophical and again existential nihilist. There are so many different things here, and we will probably talk about the title of the book as well, The Melancholy of Resistance, as I feel like that maybe adds to a bit of the theme of the film. And I think actually the Finnish name of this film is like a straight translation from the Melancholy of Resistance as well. So I think that's a very important thing to talk about the title as well. But now I will ask what Altaz thought of this film. It was his first Bellatar film, although he will see some other ones soon.
Yeah, it's like I was so surprised to see that after watching the film, and when I learned that it was based on a novel and the title of the novel was The Melancholy of Resistance, and I was just amazed because that's exactly what I felt the whole time when I was watching the movie, is this sense of moving, haunting melancholy. And it is just like it's an incredible film. I absolutely loved it, and like I shared with you, I ended up seeing it twice, and both times when I left the cinema, I felt like I'm not in my own world. Like I was just very much in that world, and I kept thinking about it, and it's like the whole experience of the film. It is, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen all the modern films like post 2000, but yeah, I would have to say this has got to be one of the best modern films. It's just so incredible, the achievement in the film itself. So I absolutely loved it.
And a couple of things I forgot to mention in the context is that Bellatar is of course still alive, but he's now retired from filmmaking, unfortunately, but he left a really good body of work, not a very huge body of work, but very stellar from what I've seen. I think I've seen like 5 films. So I've seen The Turin Horse, which I need to rewatch as I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I was way younger then, so I might like it now more. Then I watched Satan Tango, which I think is a masterpiece. Then I watched Damnation, which I think is a masterpiece, an incredible film. Then I watched The Man from London, which is a good film. It came out after Werckmeister Harmonies, I think in 2007, but it's not one of his best. But I still have to see like some of the early stuff like Autumn Almanac and Family Nest and those films. Those sound very interesting, and I think I've heard that like visually and in terms of the subject matter, they are fairly different films. And talking about this film is currently very timely due to the events in the UK, but obviously we will focus on the film and not on that, but I thought I would mention it. And then also it's kind of relevant because Artificial Eye Curzon just announced the Bellatar box set, which looks to be like a really great box set. And then they also announced the individual 4K release of Werckmeister Harmonies, and I think it said Werckmeister Harmonies is only Blu-ray, but 4K restoration. So they kind of did that trick again, like they did between vendors, that if you want the 4K of Werckmeister Harmonies, you will have to get it separately. So that's a bit annoying and kind of has that cash grab vibe to it a bit. But I think, yeah, the box set seems to be something that, yeah, I'll definitely try to get it if I can. And yeah, and of course there was the Criterion release of Werckmeister Harmonies 4K one fairly recently as well. So I think many people have in our community watched this film recently, as it has been in the conversation due to Criterion and stuff. And obviously this is one of those big staples for people who love slow cinema. And not Tarkovsky, but Bellatar was very much influenced by Andrei Tarkovsky. And you can really see that, especially like Andrei Rublev and things like that. And I think Bellatar was also a huge fan of a Hungarian director who was of the kind of previous generation, Miklos Jankso. And I think Altaz last time in the Aftertalk mentioned that he got the Kino Lorber Blu-ray set for that. So we will talk about Jankso sometime next year. A couple of his films at least. I'm a huge fan of him as well, based on the films I have seen. So that will be great to talk about. And then we can also then return to Bellatar and talk about how they are similar. But yeah, there's some context, and now we could talk about like what type of people would like this film. So, well, the obvious answer is that people who love Tarkovsky, people who love slow contemplative cinema, people who are into, I think, kind of high literature, people who are into philosophy and these kind of difficult concepts, and people who are very politically minded, I think, would like this one. I think Nietzsche fans would probably like that. It is a very nihilistic film, but it's also a very existential film, like I said. And I think you kind of get the sense from Bellatar films that he's such an intelligent guy who's very well read in both literature and philosophy. And I think that the films of his really portray that, especially this one. And it's a very challenging and dense film, so you might not like it, but I think films like this are exactly the type of thing that we need more in cinema. We need more in the world because they are so kind of timeless in a way and so intellectually stimulating and so rewatchable as they are so dense. So you can always find new meaning in these types of films, and the aesthetic just blows you away time and time again. You will see some of the best black and white cinematography here if you decide to watch it. And of course, it came out in a very interesting time as it is the year 2000, so just the century had changed and stuff, and cinema started to change a lot around that time. And I've kind of noticed that many of the best films of the 21st century actually came out on like 2000, 2001, like again, this one, Mulholland Drive, Millennium Mambo, Yeah, came out in 2000. So many of these really great films came out around that time. And I think many directors at that time wanted to discuss these big topics as the world was changing, and many people had ideas like what will the 21st century look like and things like that. Will we get flying cars, or will the human species destroy itself, or whatever? So it was a perfect time for these types of musings.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that this is a film, if you like literature, poetry, if you like experiencing feelings of wonder, if you like dystopian explorations, I would even gather and say if you like sci-fi, if you like horror, and I'll loosely say this, noir, because it cleverly uses a noir style, which I think Bellatar has used in other films, like you said, the Man from London and stuff like that, and Damnation. If you like allegory as well, and I very much agree with you that 2000s, early 2000s had very interesting films, mainly because, for the exact same reasons you were saying, that there was a time where the year 2000 symbolized this future, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or, whether it's like Back to the Future, it's always like, oh, the year 2000s, humanity is going to be at this particular place. And then we were like approaching this place that we've imagined for so long, and people started feeling all kinds of confusion about what it means, and needing to create meaning out of the year 2000 and the new millennium. So lots of interesting things there. Even in Millennium Mambo, you kind of see that. So, yeah, I agree with you 100% there. Clearly, if you like Tarkovsky, he's inspired by Tarkovsky. I would go so far as to say Werckmeister Harmonies is Bela Tar's Stalker. There's a lot of similarities, not in style per se, because that's color, and that's very visually sci-fi, but in terms of what's happening at the center, there's a Stalker-esqueness to this film. So if you like Tarkovsky and all that, and if you want to see one of the greatest films made in the 2000s, and one of the greatest films probably in general, so I would recommend this film.
And I would also say that it probably would be best to get into Tarkovsky before Bellatar. I think Bellatar is a bit more even challenging than Tarkovsky. Even though, of course, Tarkovsky is very challenging as well, but I think Bellatar is even more challenging, and Bellatar adds a bit of more of a maybe political layer than Tarkovsky. And Tarkovsky is more about philosophy and religion, but obviously there's political undertones there as well, as we have discussed. But now we could get into the spoilers. So definitely people watch this film if you can. It's also available on Criterion channel, and that's how I watched it. And the Criterion print looks really nice, and it was great to watch it that way. And I think last year when I watched it, it was available on YouTube, like in like 1080p quality as well. But I don't know if it is there anymore, but it might be on YouTube as well. And again, there are releases coming from Artificial Eye, and then there is a new Criterion 4K of it, so it should be very easy to access. And I think also streaming services like Mubi often have these kind of slow cinema films. But yeah, anyway, so now we'll get into spoilers, and we will start with the aesthetic first. So this film consists of 39 shots, so there are lots of quite long takes, although not as long as in some of his other films like Satan Tango. And the shots have this really beautiful contrast between the black and white. They are very bleak looking shots, so the black, the very dark, dominates quite a lot in many of the shots, and the whale itself looks like really disturbing in a way. And there are so many beautiful shots, like when we see the two characters walking their separate ways, and one is kind of walking straight, the other one is like going right, and even that like looks just so stunning, and everything is just so methodically planned and used. There isn't like any single flaw about the aesthetic. Everything just looks really perfect. Yeah, and he like really also creates this kind of small town Hungary setting really well, that everything looks kind of bleak and a bit kind of poor in a way, which I think adds to the idea of like revolution and the resistance that we get later on the film. And I also noticed that almost all the characters here, all the people, are men. I don't know if that says something, that most of the people are like men, like middle-aged, older men. I don't know whether he's trying to say something with that, but it might just be that we just happen to cast people. And of course, there aren't many like actual characters here. Most of them are just people, so it might just be that they happen to be the extras or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm immediately gonna ask an apology from you and whoever is going to be watching this, that it's really hard to talk about this in a methodical way and separating things out, like we discussed in the Tarkovsky thing, between the aesthetic and what the film is about. And you're absolutely right. The aesthetic is absolutely stunning and captivating and mesmerizing from the beginning to the end. There are these shots that are just unbelievable. Like you said, the long shots. So they keep a camera in place, and then they choreograph this very elaborate sequence. Like, one that comes to mind that just blew me away is when the truck is coming, pulling that trailer with the whale in it, and it's the way the camera is just placed there, and the trailer comes into light, and how it turns in front of the camera and moves off is just awe-inspiring, the feeling it creates. But what's even more awe-inspiring is that whole sequence, in a way, reflects the first sequence you see in the movie. You see this very interesting sequence where it starts with a close-up of a stove, and the fire is going, and we pan out, and it's a bar, and then there are a bunch of people hanging out, very much like you would say something that seems like out of like Russian literature or something. They're just hanging out, and this character comes in, Volushka or Janos. Janos comes in, and they say, show us. And he's like, well, I'm going to do this as a simple explanation of something way more complex. And what he orchestrates is this person at the center who acts like the sun, and he gets one person to revolve around them like the earth. Then he adds to everyone's humor in the theater a person who revolves around the earth. So you have these men in a bar, and they're like trying to express what the solar system is like, and it's all to create a sense of wonder. Now, the reason I mentioned that is that what sequence I already talked about is exactly that. It's a camera sitting there, and these things are being orchestrated into movement. And then there's a line where he says, initially you don't know what's going on, but if you watch it for long enough, you'll start kind of seeing what's happening. And so the whole film is constructed in this revolution. There's constant movement, and there's a revolution type movement. It's going round and round and round. It's kind of circular. It's kind of like a loop. It's kind of has an inevitability. And there might even be a pun on the word, because revolution and revolution, revolution, what's going on in the solar system, the Earth's revolving, and revolution, movement, change, upheaval. So right away, it's an insane movie, because how do you talk about this in a methodical way? and with so many themes and so many layers.
Yeah, and like I said in the beginning, there's like very strong political and religious like themes here, but I think I'm definitely better at analyzing politics than religious, as I'm not a very religious person and I haven't studied religion beyond the mandatory stuff in school, so the religious imagery and stuff is gonna be harder, at least for me, to discuss. But you already talked about the idea of revolution a bit, so we could maybe start getting into the themes very specifically. So of course we have this kind of revolution, societal collapse here, but it's not the type of revolution we often think about, because of course revolution often wants to bring change and stuff, but this more like feels like they want to go back in time and they want to resist change, because when we get the whale, like at first people are like curious about it, like what is this, and but then there is this societal collapse after that, and of course the whale is like, when we see it in the end, it's kind of very like, even like, how do you say, kind of rotting, and it's very dark, so people don't want change, they want kind of conformity and going back to the past and not something new. They want to just, yeah, they are scared of the new. Like we, for example, see in real life, people are scared when migrants come in. They are scared that the society is gonna change and their livelihoods are gonna change. So they want to just stick to conformity, stick to the same ways that they are used to. And of course, we see this type of thing even in like human psychology, that people like after puberty, their opinions are like start to become like very stale, and they don't change as much. When they grow older, that it's like your music taste will be the same that it was as a teenager. I mean, it's not for all people, like it's not for me, because I'm like blessed that I got the gift of curiosity and openness, I guess. But for many people, it is that they stay the same and they want everything to stay the same, because the change will disrupt them and their place in society might get worse, or at least they will think that it will get worse if the society changes.
Yeah, I mean, you're you're absolutely right. Uh, so you have this element, and I feel like two hollow things. One is this straw figure, puppet, shadow, not even like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, but someone even more, in some ways, unthreatening, in the form of the prince, this homuncular character who is just a shadow, like it's Plato's cave. It's a shadow on the wall, and it's talking, and apparently can incite all these people to violence, which seems absolutely ridiculous. Then you have this whale that, in and of itself, like you said, very cleverly, is both empty and full of meaning, right? Because in one way, it's empty. It's just like what you have back there, your wonderful edition of Moby Dick. it's most definitely calling out to Moby Dick, because what is the significance of the whale in that book? Or what is the significance of the whale in the Bible when it's like, Jonah and the whale? And like, so here's an empty symbol, but it's not an empty symbol, because if you think about it as a whale in the scientific sense, it's in evolution, it's just wonder. How did this creature ever exist? How did it come to existence? How was it designed? How did it come into being? But in the film, it's just a prop, so it doesn't have meaning. In I think Bellatar is playing with this. What is meaning? Where does it get created? So it's like, this whale comes into town. What's symbolism? Nothing. It's just a whale that's come into town. You can observe it. We don't even know if it's a real whale. To be honest, I've read some opinion that this is just a prop whale, like it's something fake, and it's meant to be fake to elaborate the point. So what is the point of this whale? Nothing. But everyone seems to create an immediate meaning to this whale. Oh, there's all this disruption, and things are being incited because this whale came into town. Now, like you said very poignantly, the whole point about change. Oh, something has changed. Well, what's changed? Nothing. Well, there are things that are changed. You now have to become aware of science, maybe, or creation, or religion. I don't know. The whale can symbolize so many different things, and people are very upset about it, and they're just getting incited. And apparently, the prince character, can incite people. Now, how the prince is given power, that's the question. Why this thing has a meaning, that's another question. And yeah, that's just the beginning of all that's going on in the film. And I guess I'll add to that. For me, from beginning to end, there's one symbolism that's constantly there, and that's the fire. It opens with a stove, and there's a fire, and then you constantly see this fire, and by the end of it, the fire is rising in the city square, and you see Balushka, and to me, he represents like a stalker-like character. He's kind of just going around, he's observing, he's trying to lead, he's trying to help, and is he Prometheus? Like, is he like Prometheus? Like, because he gives that knowledge of the solar system. So is he like Prometheus, like giving human beings knowledge, uh, but it's actually resulting in their downfall for the reasons you said, because of people who are resisting and people who can't handle it, and then people like his uncle who just take that knowledge and then retreat into their ivy towers and want nothing to do with the world. I felt there's something going on with the whole myth of Prometheus going on in this world.
And returning to the whale, I think maybe the whale actually means something, but these people just don't know what it means, and that creates that kind of nihilism and the meaningless there, that we just aren't like smart enough to understand maybe like a God's message or divine creation or whatever. It's something so out of our scope, and that kind of fear of not understanding something can cause this type of chaos. And like going back to also the political themes, like that again, the idea of change, because we are so scared of change, we fear it so much that we are kind of ready to go to conservatism and fascism and things like that, because that's preferable to something unknown, something it's like preferable to the change. And this kind of really shows how easy it is for the society to collapse. So I think it's just so relevant currently what is happening in many of the Western countries and stuff, that such small things can kind of brainwash people into thinking that, yeah, we need to rise up, and yeah, we need to have these fascist ideals, and yeah, destroy all the change. And then obviously there's these ideas, these myths of the past, which aren't actually true, but then they add to the hatred as well, and the fear. But yeah, there's so much.
Yeah, there's so much in what you're saying. First, I want to tie it to something you are talking about in the Mabarosi chat. You're talking about human beings needing to be godlike figures. So one thing Bellatar, I feel, does in this film is he's saying we as human beings are quite egotistical and we think we are really intelligent, we're very advanced. Compared to all these creatures, we're so advanced. We're an advanced creature because we have this intellect. But he's kind of showing how weak our intellect is. While we think we're superior in this way, in terms of what how complex reality is, our brains can't comprehend that. So I was just thinking, like, what would be like a millennial or Gen Z like one line review of this film? And it's like, oh, this whale came to town and it basically broke everyone's brain, right? Because it's like it basically just broke everyone's brain. Like they don't exactly what you just said. They don't know what to make of it because they think they're these very advanced intellectual creatures, but a simple thing like a whale is basically broken their brain because they just don't like it. And if you ask them, why don't you like it? Because that's what's going on. He's going around asking, what problem do you have with the whale, in a sense? And no one has an explanation for why they don't like it. We just don't like it. We wish it had never come here. And that goes back to the whole Prometheus thing. Well, we wish we never had this knowledge because it broke our brain. And the first scene is him, Walushka, saying, for those brains that can't comprehend, I'm going to make a simple demonstration. So, in a way, I feel like it's like Bellatar being very meta and saying, through this film, I'm going to show you something very simple because it's way too complex. But even the simple thing he's showing seems too complex and almost breaks our brain. Because how can you comprehend this solar system that's going round and round? And in that, evolution happened. And then there was this such thing as a great whale. Then came these human beings. Then these human beings have this kind of intellect, or a kind of intellect that goes and just creates meanings and symbols out of everything. And then that leads to, I don't know, all kinds of movements and violence and confusion and patriarchal systems and authoritarianism. Like, how do you make sense of that? You can't. And so you're left with by the end of the film is this immense melancholy, like this sadness. And it's he's doing it right at the year 2000, and it makes you wonder, is this film about where we've been, where we are, or where we're going? Because if it's where we're going, it's terrifying because where we're going is where we've already been. And so then it's just the inevitability of the cycle. We're going nowhere because we don't have a brain and an intelligence or a social intelligence or a societal intelligence that could ever help us, so we actually make sense of some of these things instead of just blindly creating biases and meanings and symbols out of things that we don't even really understand what they are. And I think that's the film at the most philosophical, but I'm still being quite general because I think there's so much more with music and all that that adds even more layers to the film.
Yeah, and we also see it here like a battle of, again, the collective and the individual, that the people are marching together, they are forming a collective, but then they believe in this one individual who will fix things. Like that's how it is often, that these people talk about, I'm an individual, I'm a critical thinker, but then Donald Trump is gonna save everything. So people need that idea of a big symbol, that individual figure, but then they don't have any individuality themselves. They want the whole collective to mirror themselves. They want everybody to be the same. So here it is, these like middle-aged, elderly, white guys, all of them are the same basically. They think the same. So there is no individual, but then they want that individual on the top to tell them what to do, to have something simple to believe in, and have all these simple answers to very complex questions that don't really have human answers to them. And like you said, it really has that inevitability of the cycle, that all of these problems just come back around. So this film is kind of like the past, but it's also the current, and sadly probably will always be the future unless we start developing and evolving very quickly.
Absolutely. And in a way, I also feel like Bellatar's, they're all like taking shots at, in a way, what we're doing right now. Because you have this intellectual who's talking about the Werckmeister harmonies, and it's like, well, what's the relevance of that? And he's just sitting there and he's obsessed with the Werckmeister harmonies and how it was wrong, and it was about 5 notes, and then but it's really about 7 notes because there's 7 notes, and this really pedantic exploration. He's just holed up in his house with his books and his theories and his ideas, and he's painting intellectuals as impotent as well. And in a way, you think about it, like it's kind of like a joke on us too, because we're discussing this film, and it's a film that in a way somewhat is critiquing what we're doing. We're sitting there and we're like, it's about this, and it's about this political movement, and this and this and this. And then think about us as politically, we're impotent. Like, you're talking about these movements, and it's like, can you go and do something about it with all these things that you've learned, or your appreciation of a Bellatar film or appreciation of Dostoevsky? Can I? So there's this sadness and melancholy too, because it's the intellectual is impotent. They have their ideas, but they cannot move the masses or people, or they can't convey these ideas. And again, once again, we go right back to the beginning. I can't explain to you, because if I'm an intellectual and I'm an astrophysicist or whatever, I understand the solar system and everything in such a complex way, and I can't really explain it to you, because you can turn around and say, well, that's not what created the solar system. There was a creator that created the solar system, and we're stuck. So there's a stuckness to the film. We're just stuck with these different phenomenon, and there's nothing we can do about it, which is scary, because this film absolutely terrifies me. Each time I watched it, I felt like terrified, like, and sad all at the same time.
Yeah, many philosophers like Schopenhauer have said that the life of an intellectual is a lonely one, because the masses won't understand you, and you don't really understand them, even though you have the theories of them. And then when you have intellectual here and there, you cannot really do anything about the huge marching masses, the revolt of the masses, because they will overpower you. So that's how we see that the intellectuals are impotent, like you said, that we can theorize everything to perfection, but it's not gonna change anything, because there's just not enough of us, and we don't have the power. And I mean, I'm not like a huge brilliant intellectual, so I use we in a different way, by the way. But yeah, so like that also kind of gives more nihilism to this film, that it shows that the intellectual endeavors in the end are meaningless as well. Like we see the rotting whale. Yeah, the change ends like that. It rots, and then we can start the cycle once again, and then there will be a new whale, and then in the end it will rot again. So
why do you think the significance of the eye, him peering into the eye of the whale? Because I feel like that's such a powerful symbol or moment that's repeated multiple times, is that they're drawn to the eye of the whale. What are they trying to see? If the whale had a soul, or is it just wonder? Because we see that what's funny and ironic about the whole thing is, what we're saying about the whale, and it might even represent absolutely nothing, but it's such a powerful symbol that even the marketing for all the Blu-ray releases and the 4K releases have the whale. We get so excited about the whale. Oh, look at the whale on the cover, or he's looking into the eye of the whale in the cover of the Criterion. That's the picture that's taken from the film, and everything's around the whale. What did it feel like to you when he's looking at the eye
Yeah, that's
of
a
the
really
whale?
good question. I think if we think about the whale as change, that if we look through the eye of the whale, I guess it's some type of contemplation of the change as well, and then the cycle that we just talked about. But I know, like it's really hard to say, because I thought about the whale more as just the whole whale and not the eye as much. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Like what you're saying, it's about wonder,
Yeah.
is what it felt like to me. It's just that sequence where he walks around the whale, and again, it reflects what happened in the first mini scenario, where it's like he says, "Well, in the beginning, you don't know what's happening." So in the beginning, he goes in and he doesn't know quite what he's looking at. Right? He's like walking around the whale, and even the audience doesn't quite know what it's looking at. And by the end of the film, the whale is in full light as the uncle, the intellectual, he walks by the whale. So there's all these symbolism that I feel like I might watch this film, I don't know how many times in my life, and I'll never get exactly what each means. All I know is that what you said, that feeling of wonder, that is what I loved. It's like you feel it, what it's like to just wonder and just contemplate and be awe-inspired. Like something is just so much larger than you just cannot comprehend it no matter what you do. That inability to grasp something and really bring it down to the material is very evocative in the film.
Yeah, and I think when we again look at somebody in the eyes, I often you get these images of like maybe someone crying or all these like big emotions. So maybe it kind of when you look the whale at the eyes, you can see what the change could have been, and that creates that kind of melancholy.
Hmm.
Maybe the change would have been good, but then again, like we talked about, we go back to the cycle always. But there might be these people might in the end realize that change would have been good, but then it just doesn't come when the society rejects it so much.
Yeah, and here's where I do think, because initially you think about everything that's going on, and there's only one small part where the Werckmeister harmonies themselves are being discussed. So you're like, what is the relevance? Why name it after this composer that had a musical theory? And one thing I can gather from that is sometimes we can't intellectually process something, but music allows us to feel something, like you said, that melancholy, that wonder, that excitement, or that tragedy, or that music can just do that. So this film is a form of music because it's to do what maybe music can do, but add the visual and everything too, because to allow you to just feel the struggle, to feel the conflict, to feel the wonder, to feel the exploration. And maybe I might go so far as to say that the title itself is talking in one way what the film is about. Music is this wonderful thing, it's this experience. So, what is the relevance of the Werckmeister harmonies in the sense that what does it matter if the theory of the thing is that there are five tones and whether or five notes and whether the five notes are wrong and it was actually seven, because music makes you feel. That's the greater question. How does music make you feel? How does music represent these things? How can music create this experience? And the intellectualization and whether there's seven notes or not, what is the relevance? And I'm not saying it's irrelevant. I think there's a question that the symbolisms, the meanings, the confinement we do to try to make sense of things, is that relevant, or what the thing itself is that's relevant?
Yeah, and I think I started thinking about the eye and also music, because in some of our music conversations we talked about how music is kind of a very abstract art form, very stream of consciousness art form. And if we think about some like eye imagery in art, like there's some like crazy anime where we have these like very disturbing huge eyes with like demons or monsters, and then the eye kind of represents consciousness. Or if we think about Lord of the Rings and Sauron, the tower, the eye, like that's Sauron, his consciousness, his way of looking at the world. So the eye can kind of represent our whole minds, our consciousness. And maybe they keep looking at the eye because we always wonder about our consciousness and the unconsciousness, but that's something we don't understand. And that's what makes the whale even more unexplainable when you think about the eye as consciousness and unconsciousness, that you can look at it how much you want, but you cannot understand it. You cannot verbalize what it means.
Absolutely. And, getting back to your wonderful copy of Moby Dick there, like one reason for the pursuit of that whale is a person in search of their own soul, after grief, which is something we discussed in Mabarosi as well, which is very interesting. So maybe peering into the eye also to me felt like you trying to look for your own soul. So at first I said, "Oh, do you want to see if the soul, if this, looking into the eye of the beast?" And then, because there was a time where the whale is just a beast, or the belly of the beast and the belly of the whale, and there are all these loaded concepts. And here you're like, maybe you're just looking for your own soul, like you're trying to understand the soul of humanity, like you said. So you're like, and it's leaving you a bit melancholy because we still don't really understand the soul of humanity. We don't really understand what we're trying to do. And as we discussed in the last chat, maybe there isn't something particular, and we just need to focus on what we're capable of doing and doing that right, versus trying to ask these larger, loftier questions that then end up creating the sources of conflict and disruption and destruction and violence and acceptance and rejection. Maybe we just need to live all in harmony of that. So again, now we're back to music, harmony. Is there a harmoniousness that we could appeal to in terms of existence and even how we live? And are we in harmony? Are we in disharmony? Have we got it wrong, like the Werckmeister harmonies? Is there, we haven't quite got it right yet, and we're thinking what we have figured out is right. A lot of like very profound explorations and complex, difficult explorations and questions.
Yeah, I think the idea of soul is very interesting here, because often in stories like fantasy horror stories, for example, we think of soul as something that gives us the emotional side to us, the caring side, the empathetic side. But then there are these stories when like a human being, for example, loses their soul and then they become like psychopaths or whatever. And here in the film we can see how these people become violent and they lose their compassion, empathy, so they kind of lose their souls, and these feels like they also lose their kind of collective compassion, their collective soul. So maybe when they look at the eye, they are really trying to see if they do have a soul, if they have that more compassionate, caring side to them, or if they can discover it, or whether it's all just this meaningless existence that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what I experienced is this film is very emotional. It makes you very emotional, which is interesting given what is actually going on. It's inexplicable how emotional it makes you, and I think it's for that reason. It so captures that feeling you have about trying to understand, what am I, what is my soul, what is our soul, who are we as a species or an existence. I mean, are we no different than just this whale, just another kind of living creature or living body that just got created through evolution, through biology and all that, and at the end of the day we're just creating all this meaning to kind of comfort ourselves. Yeah, it just leaves you with that.
Yeah, I think really we see ourselves and our society when we look at the eye, because the whale is rotting, it's dead, kind of like our society is rotting when we don't have compassion, empathy, when we fear things that we shouldn't fear, when we reject things that we should accept. So yeah, the whale is really kind of like our society in a way, our world. This meaningless, rotting thing, and something that it will always be like that. You can bring the whale again and again, but it will always end up rotten, like I said.
Absolutely. And I think similar to Stalker as well, one question that you could probably spend another whole hour on would be Janos Valushka, like that. Who is that? Like Stalker, who is he? Because he's kind of he is just going around helping people, but he's not quite a guide, and he's kind of being forced to just do things. Okay, go get me my lunch, go get that. So that aimless observer, or maybe they do have an aim, passive observer, just like Prometheus bound. He's just now bound to watch the destruction that comes out of that knowledge he's shared, is also another whole significant, interesting aspect of the film. He does not seem quite like from our world. He doesn't quite seem, and I think visually too, choosing Lars Rudolph and physically how he looks and all that almost creates that he's like an alien type figure. Like he's not quite of this world, but he is in this world, and then he's just kind of meant to observe the sins of men. So another Christ type symbolism there, like there was in Stalker, forced to observe all that, and all you can do is weep about it, feel sad about it, because people don't quite know what they do. Another interesting part of the film as well.
Yeah, he feels like kind of like the collective consciousness of this society, that he like has this, shows his emotion and this fear in his face when he goes around the people, like near the circus tent, and we see that he realizes that something is wrong here, and he feels all the emotions that the other people should be feeling as well. So I guess we see certain type of ideal there as well, that again people should be able to have a soul and feel these emotions, but then we see that the masses don't feel that here, that they just want to have the resistance and not care about anything. So
yeah, absolutely. And just the haunting, I mean, the other haunting sequence in the film where they just long 8-minute sequence or whatever, when they go and attack the hospital. I mean, that is just very, again, another powerful imagery, right? That this mob going and attacking the most vulnerable. Like they don't really pose any threat to them, because what threat can someone in a hospital or an asylum pose on all of society? But they've decided that they do pose this threat, and because they've been set off by the whale, and what does the whale have anything to do with it? And they just go and they start destroying it. And then there's that whole striking thing of the older man standing naked in the tub, and then them coming to some sort of awareness and feeling some sort of shame, like, what are we doing? And filing back out. That's another whole like terrifying, powerful sequence in the film as well.
yeah, it's a very emotional sequence, how the music plays around that scene. Like that was kind of what I was talking about when I said that like the last 30 or so minutes are so emotional, and that was kind of one of the things that game to me, it's just so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, everything about it just comes to a head. But I have to say, when you go on this film, it's what, 2.5 hours maybe? This film?
Yeah, it's 2 hours 20 minutes or something.
Yeah. It doesn't really feel like it though. It's just like a real journey. It's like there's a timelessness to it. You just kind of go there. And a part of you doesn't want to leave it either, which I find really interesting because such a challenging film in that regard, an unconventional film and all the things it's doing, there's a part of you that doesn't want to leave when it ends. Like,
Yeah, it's just one of those films that has that kind of special aura that kind of creates this dark hypnosis between the work and the viewer. So, and it
yeah,
just keeps getting better as it goes on. Like I think the most beautiful part, like I said, is the towards the end. I think, and you could have watched even more of it, but I guess you will get that experience from Satan Tango as it is 7.5 hours. So we'll see if you feel the same way after that one.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah. But I understand that's a different style of exploration. Like Werckmeister Harmonies is something different in terms of style of film and what he's doing. I don't know. I don't know for myself, so it's just what I.
Well, visually it's very Bellatar, but I think this is maybe a bit more plot heavy and a bit more dense thematically, but I need to watch Satan Tango again. But now I was thinking about one religious theme that I was thinking about that you can really, I think, see this film from both kind of pro-religion, but also kind of atheist point of view in the way that you could see that this is society that has lost meaning and maybe they need a god to give the objective morals to them. Maybe they have lost God and maybe God is dead, like Nietzsche would have said that. So it kind of gives that away, but then it also you can look at it from atheist point of view that maybe the whale is like a meaningless religious symbol, but then it will make people all crazy, like religion often has, that people will kill each other due to religion and they will do all bad things just because of religion that probably doesn't actually have any meaning if you think about it logically. So you can really see both of these sides. And I think this film, I think in some review it mentioned that even though it's a very political film, at the same time it's very apolitical and nihilistic in the way that it shows these different sides, but it doesn't necessarily take a side itself. And then as a viewer, you can look at it through one of these lenses, so and take a side.
Yeah. I mean, I have that question as well as, whether this Bellatar is more cynical than Tarkovsky, because there's evidence in this film that he's more cynical. But then there's this other thing where in the beginning where he shows that, oh, there's this eclipse and this darkness falls on the earth, and will the sky fall on us? Will the earth open up underneath us and swallow us? That kind of darkness. And then he says, wait, but that's not the end. And then slowly these things start moving again and the light starts coming back in. So I'm like, this, it's interesting. Is he saying there's hope? Or is he much more cynical than Tarkovsky in some ways? But like you said, yeah, it's pretty clever, and he leaves you in some sort of ambiguity about the
Yeah,
future.
but I think it's a like very very cynical work, but with Tarkovsky you often see that glimpse of hope, as he was a true believer in Christ himself. So I think he got that hopeful side to him from his own religious beliefs, but I'm not sure what Bellatar believes himself.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's this tradition in Hungary overall that there are these like very dense political, bleak films, like the Miklos Jankso films are also very political, bleak about revolution and war and authoritarianism and things like that. And of course, there's the past with like the communist control in those countries and their own like battles with that and things like that. So, and of course, this film was before like Viktor Orban's Hungary. Now again, it has gone to fascism, so it yet kind of adds to more to this film if you think about the current state of Hungary as well.
Yeah, I mean, did Bellatar see it coming? That's one question I have, because one of the things that we didn't think about at the beginning of the 2000s was really a return of some of these things. We really thought we were past certain things. And then when you see them coming back up 20 years later and you see this film, I have so many questions. I wonder what he must be feeling as a Hungarian, seeing that. And another was, did the film in a way predict it, that it'll cycle right back? That almost like you said, we can't help but prop up these prince-like figures who will only preach to us to incite us to these things. I don't know.
Although the good thing about the cycles is that it will always get better at some point too, even though it will get, after it gets better, it will get worse again, but at least you will get some good moments. Like after World War II, there was these kind of booms that the economies get better and societies got better, but now many people are looking back at those types of ideologies that we had in the World War II. I want to go back to it, even though they don't realize it themselves often. But then when we now get the far right thing in Europe, it probably will after that be again that these will become more and more fringe, but then they might rise again a couple decades later. So
yeah, you're right. And there are all these things as well, is that people wanting to return to kinds of history that they don't understand that period. So the romance of, well, in this period, let's say we were much more religious oriented and our nations are very much oriented towards religion, and wouldn't that be so much better? But then you don't really think about that the medieval times and the dark ages and the inequality and some of the terrible things were actually happening under those regimes, where you're supposedly, nations that are very much committed to a particular religious belief and a certain religious way of life. So, and I think, like you said, clearly Bellatar is a very intelligent person, clearly has read a lot of literature. So there's a lot of, things like almost like Canterbury Tales in there too, that you believe you're going to create this meaning or you're going to reject this one thing, and then all of a sudden you're going to live in this utopian society. Is not the case. Like propping these straw things up is not going to end up create a better society. You need to peer into your own soul and try to understand. And maybe at its most hopeful, that's the message. That do some self-reflection, like really try to understand what you're talking about before you start deciding that is the case or that is not the case.
Yeah.
But good luck with that. And that's the cynicism, I think. So it's like,
yeah, and it just isn't enough if some people do self-reflection, because there will be so many people who don't do that. So.
Exactly.
And that self-reflection can also lead to even worse ideas with some people.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to have created this piece of work on part of your own nation in a way, and then see your nation fall into that slump, I can't imagine what he must be feeling. He must, because I remember I saw this quote where someone was saying, they asked him once, "Where's the hope in your films?" And he responded and said, "The hope is that you watch this film." I hope that you watch this film. And then clearly we see that world cinema, we talk about all these things, but often these works aren't fully appreciated in their own context for the reasons we discussed, that other kinds of escapism and all that stuff is much more interesting even within those countries. So if enough people had watched Werckmeister Harmonies in Hungary, you probably wouldn't have the government you have now. So that's the sad part. Hence the melancholy of resistance.
And
We're
sometimes
resisting and yeah, go ahead.
the hope can grow after you have those bleak realizations. Because then when you really know what the world is about, you know the harsh realities, then you know what you can do about it, rather than when you are just ignorant about the harsh realities and just try to believe in something good where the good doesn't exist. That won't get you anywhere. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hope can grow from pessimism, I guess. Yeah, even though we sometimes say that maybe hope and optimism are the thing, but maybe it actually comes from pessimism at first.
Yeah, maybe the pessimists are the hopeful, and that's what I've always sort of felt. What you're saying, even though people see that as a form of cynicism, pessimism, but I feel it's responsibility. Seeing things as they are is a form of responsibility, and hope can come from that, because once you recognize, then you know what you need to do, from your personal level to a societal level. So I agree with you in that. But will we ever get there is doubtful. But I think that's why when we see films like that, it gives us some kind of solace.
Yeah, the difficult thing about the humans are that they only see flaws in the other, but they don't see the flaws in themselves. So, and that goes with societies as well. That, yeah, let's say Hungarians don't see the flaws in their society, but then they might see the flaws in French society or whatever, and then vice versa. Even though it could be look inward, fix those flaws, and then you can gain better understanding about flaws in general when you realize the flaws that you have, but then also what others have. And then, like in Misoguchi's Sancho the Bailiff, they say that even if you are hard on yourself, be merciful to others. So that's a rule to live by. If we all lived by that rule, the world would be a great place. So.
Yeah, and as we discussed with the various Koreeda films discussions, I think he very much takes that perspective. He very much gives empathy to those who are maybe very easy to dismiss and categorize. But yes. But yeah, what a film. What a film.
Yeah, we can start wrapping it up here. An interesting, very difficult conversation. Like those thoughts just kept slowly building in my head. Like when you ask about the eye, at first I didn't have anything, but then it started building, and then we dissected the idea of the eye in the film better. So that's often how these conversations work, that we work, our brains work on the spot, and then some in the end we will land to some sort of conclusion. But yeah, in this film you could discuss for ages, of course, just like with many other Bellatar films and just like many other poetic slow cinema films.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could now mention the couple of films that we will do next time. And another thing about the schedule is that as there are many great screenings in London that Altaz will go to see, the podcast schedule might have some minor changes, but I will of course update the schedule when we decide those changes for good. But the current plan is that next time we will talk about two very difficult films. Both are pretty much as difficult as Werckmeister Harmonies. But this one I have on Blu-ray, so it's Jacques Rivet's Zéline and Julie Go Boating, his most famous film. Very excited to watch this one again. I've only seen it once. It even says here that the most innovative film since Citizen Kane. So yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But I love that film. It will be our second Rivet film, and this is more of his kind of usual style when The Nun was different than his usual style. So this is more difficult than The Nun. And The Nun was difficult enough to talk about anyway.
Yeah, that's difficult too.
And then we have a film from one of the great Italian filmmakers, Federico Fellini, the first of 3 Fellini films that we will discuss this year, and we will start with the most difficult and the weirdest one. So it's Fellini Satyricon, which controversially is my favorite from him. I just love it, but it doesn't really have any concrete plot. It's about aesthetic, so it will be very difficult to talk about, but it also will leave a lot up to interpretation, as it is like aesthetically driven film. So in the sense, the discussion will probably be very similar to what we did with Heroic Purgatory, as they are kind of similar films in many ways.
Yeah, very excited with these two, and they're definitely going to be challenging.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, you can see the fuller schedule down below. Like I said, I might have to update it a bit, but not that much probably. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts about Bellatar and Werckmeister Harmonies. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.